Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Period Chats podcast. We took a little break due to the flooding in Austin. This is the first available day I've had space to record, and I'm so excited. I've got my friend Erin on here, and she's absolutely amazing. She's a gut health dietitian, and she also has a master's degree in nutrition science. So, without further ado, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because you will do a much better job than me. So, tell us all about you, your practice, and kind of why you got into gut health specifically.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kate. I'm excited to come on. I know we had a really great IG live. My name's Erin Kenney, and I am obsessed with the gut microbiome. And people are often confused about what the gut is. When I'm talking about the gut, I'm talking about the bacteria in our lower intestines, mainly because of my own journey with gut health and healing my hormones and fixing my digestive issues. But mainly, what I focus on with clients is how the gut is linked to so many systems in the body, from hormones to metabolism to thyroid, to mental health, our mental health. So I am so excited to talk to you today about all of these different areas because the gut is a really, really important part of our body that diet and nutrition play a huge role in.
Yes. And I think it's important to point out how I found you and how we kind of became connected because it points out your awesome social media too. So, 2020 was when we got connected, year of TikTok for sure. So I was on TikTok and Erin had this great one about she's sitting on a toilet and she's talking all about poops. And I was like, I have to be friends with this person. They seem awesome. So shout out to at the end, we'll link her TikTok and her Instagram and her website because she's got great resources there. So that's how I found this beautiful resource that I'm bringing to you guys.
Well, thank you. Yes, and social media is definitely not my primary business, and you'll be able to tell by some of my, newly graphics that I'm getting a hang of. I mostly do one-on-one counseling with clients, but it's been a really great way to connect with like-minded individuals, and I love what you guys are doing at Funkit, and it's just really cool to see that you can connect with these people, and I love social media for that reason.
I know it can't I feel like this year I've actually used social media in a much more meaningful way than I did in the past. So I guess that's one positive coming out. I guess it's over a year now, but just
Yeah,
so
that's
let's
positive.
dive in. So gut health is something that, you know, it's interesting because I get asked a lot about it and I'm not an expert in gut health. I know a lot about it. I've studied it. I am a dietitian, but it is a whole huge, beautiful ecosystem. So can we just dive into actually what does that mean? Like I feel like you see it all the time in magazines or on social media. What's actually our gut health?
Yeah. So when I'm talking about the gut microbiome, I'm not talking about, I used to think stomach when I would think of gut, but when we're talking about the gut, we're referring to these billions of bacteria that coexist with our other human cells, and they're actually found in the lower intestine. And people often say good bacteria versus bad bacteria and then neutral bacteria. All of these bacteria serve a purpose, from digestion to metabolism to brain health. But the ideal gut composition, the ideal bacteria are those that are diverse. So ideally, we want to have this environment that's really diverse, that's been nourished, that has variety, and that's when we see better health outcomes, better hormone balance, better thyroid, things like that. Is these wonderful billions of microorganisms.
Yeah, it's that was so mind-blowing me to find out how many of these little bacteria were living in our systems. Okay, so a lot of people like you see all these things like, oh, this is good for gut health, this is good for gut health. When you're working with a new client, obviously it's individualized and personal, but where are some like general topics that you start with? Or actually, let's back up. What are some indications that our gut health may not be
Mm.
totally like 100%?
Yeah. And I think people often think of the most obvious ones as being specific to the digestive system. So, constipation, bloating, really bad gas, diarrhea. So, those are more of the isolated ones. But then you also have things like poor mood, anxiety, depression, you have hormone imbalance, you have thyroid dysfunction. Our gut bacteria convert active thyroid hormone. You have issues like skin, like eczema, psoriasis, um, neurological conditions, autoimmune disease, food sensitivities. The list goes on. I mean, because of the fact that our gut is so connected, but those are some of the most common ones that I see.
Yeah, it's interesting because, and we talked about this before. I had eczema, rosacea, and terrible PMS.
Hmm.
And I had all kinds of gut issues too. I feel like dietitians, we go into this because we have all kinds of
Yeah.
issues, like nutritional issues. But I never thought those three things were connected until I saw a doctor in New Zealand, a naturopath, and they got me on like a different diet for my gut health. And then I started seed cycling too. But I think it's interesting to note that the skin, the mood, and the hormone balance can actually also be linked to gut health, which obviously at Funkit we do a lot with hormones. So wanted to double shout that out, that those things can be linked to our gut health. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but just wanted to pinpoint that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I get on a discovery call and someone says, I'm constipated or I have really bad bloating and this has been going on for a little while. And then I'll say, like, oh, is there anything else that you want to work on, together? And they'll say, well, my hormones too. Like, I want to work on my hormones too. And I'll tell them, trust me, what we're doing already by addressing gut health will transfer over to better hormone health. So you're on the right track. If you're focusing on gut health, the same, recommendations will cross over.
That's awesome. Okay. So we've kind of gone over what you would kind of look for, and that it's not just isolated to those digestive issues, even though that can be a very big indicator. I know bloating is one I hear all the time, like
Mhm.
I'm always bloated or things like that. So when someone comes to you, you've kind of gone through these different things, and then where do you start? So do you do testing on their gut, or like how does somebody find a practitioner to work with to help with gut health?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, where I start is going to depend on the severity of the person's symptoms and also their history. So, if somebody comes to me and they have a full blown autoimmune disease that has been diagnosed and they've been struggling with that for several years, I might go ahead and do the GI map, which is a stool test. And the reason for that is because we really need to see, what's going on in the gut. Do they have candida? Do they have H. pylori? Is there some type of overgrowth that we need to address that's been creating inflammation and harm for so long that we now have an autoimmune disease? If somebody comes to me and their digestive issues are, some bloating, some constipation, but general, their overall health picture doesn't look like it's too bad, we're going to start with food. And every single client we start with the essentials. So as a dietitian, you could spit these out. Are you getting enough protein? Are you eating enough fiber? Are you drinking enough water? Protein's huge. I find a lot of people not eating enough protein, and we need to remember that our gut is a tissue, and it sloughs off those, the cells, the dead cells every few days, and we need protein to rebuild it. And then water, we need to drink plenty of water. We need to be getting a variety of different carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are not the devil. I see a lot of people eliminating carbohydrates.
And getting
Another
very constipated.
Yeah, yeah, and getting really constipated. It's what is it, the keto diet where everyone gets constipated when they go on it, and that's because you're reducing carbs, which feed the gut bacteria. We need those good carbohydrates.
Yeah. And I always tell people it's like, okay, here's the unsexy answer. Like, we need carbs, fat, and protein, and we need water and sleep. Okay, let's start there and see what happens.
Yeah.
And I would love to talk to you about this too. Like, I always try to get people to like rethink protein because I think
Mm,
people think like, okay, I have to eat a ton of meat or consume a ton of protein powder. So
yeah.
could you touch on that? Like, when you're talking about protein, like what other things can we incorporate?
Yeah, and I'll give you a funny example too. I had a client, and this was how I learned how to talk better about protein to my clients, was to the way that I rephrase it. I said, we really got to get your protein up, and told her how many grams we were aiming for. And I checked her food record the week after, and she was eating like chicken breast for a snack and for lunch. And I said, like, what's going on there? And she was like, well, I don't know what other protein sources to have. So pumpkin seeds are a great source of protein. 8 grams for a fourth of a cup. Adding nuts and seeds, all variety of those things. Oats, 6 grams in a serving of oatmeal. Other whole grains can provide some protein. Certain vegetables can add 2 to 3 grams here and there. So it doesn't have to come from meat. You can really create food combining situations where you can, a few nuts and seeds, a whole grain, some dark colored vegetables, and you can get some good protein in a meal. It doesn't have to just come from meat.
Yeah, thanks for like clarifying, because I think I had the same thing. I was like, we're going to increase our protein, because I used to work with clients privately, and like we would go through it, and then they'd be like, okay, so I'm just going to like, and it was a lot of meat, and I was like, no, like Ezekiel bread, like sprouted grain toast, peanut butter, and then like I will put like the funket seeds on it,
Hmm.
actually has more protein than eggs.
Yeah.
So it just depends. Like I think that's a really good point to make. You can combine and layer your foods to really create a more like a holistic picture.
Yeah, and also too, I want to mention that a lot of protein powders out there do not fare well with most people's digestive systems. They're protein isolates, and those can be very difficult to digest. And then also, research has shown that high amounts of animal products does not provide a favorable environment for gut microbiome. So it's that unsexy word of balance where a few animal proteins in there might be optimal for you, and then getting a bunch of those plant proteins that contain fiber and phytonutrients.
Yeah, that's what I love, because everyone's so different. We all need different forms of protein, different type. Like balance looks different for every single person, and our guts are very unique. Every single one of them is different. So I love that you pointed that out.
Yeah.
Also about protein powders, side note, I finally found one to add to smoothies. It's like a rice protein. It's like NutriBio. I forget what it's called.
Okay.
It is a low FODMAP one.
Hmm.
So, and it's just like rice protein powder. I'll have to send it to you if you have any clients who do still like to put it in smoothies.
Yeah.
Taking me 26 years to find a protein powder that doesn't make me bloated, gassy, and constipated.
Yeah. So for me, that's what is it called? It's a Sprout Living brand. That's the one that I really like. It's a pumpkin seed. It's a
Yeah,
pumpkin seed one. So
pumpkin seeds are the best.
I just did a video on them today. I'm obsessed. Zinc, magnesium. I mean, you know all this, but for the listeners, I mean, your gut needs all of those things. Magnesium can help with constipation. Zinc will help with your immune system. 70% of your immune system is located in the gut. So eat your pumpkin seeds.
We have like a pretty decent percentage of people who seed cycle with us who have either already gone through menopause and don't have cycles anymore,
Mhm.
but they enjoy the easy fiber and from the seeds, and because it's pumpkin seeds, flax seeds, sesame, and sunflower. So
Mhm.
they were like, oh, well, we really like still doing it even though we don't have a cycle, just because it's an easy way to get fiber and nutrients. And I was like,
Yeah.
and like magnesium, it's literally, I think it's something like 68% of them. I say this in every podcast, I swear, that like 68% of Americans don't get enough magnesium, and it's so important.
Mhm. So many different processes in the body that we need magnesium for. And I mean, we'd be doing a disservice if we didn't focus on it. I'm not big on supplements. Like I don't love to promote specific isolated nutrients. And I'm sure you can relate. Food is
Same.
food is
Food is
medicine, right?
medicine.
Food is medicine. So if we can avoid having to rely on supplements, and there's so many amazing foods out there that can provide us with these missing nutrients.
Oh, I should insert my Brazil nuts story here. Okay, we have some good stories already. So on LinkedIn, I'm just like trying to comment on everyone's posts, like all my friends. Erin posted this cool article about Brazil nuts, and
Mhm.
I commented on it, and I think it was something like, "Oh, Brazil butts are the best." So I said butts instead of nuts, and my husband called me. I was like, "Did you mean to comment Brazil butts on this person's LinkedIn post?" And I was like, oh, "No, but that's such a me thing to do." But Brazil nuts have lots of magnesium in them.
I love your husband looking out for you too. Like my mom's the first person to be like, I just saw your post. There's an edit on the. So first of
There's
all, that's
typo.
fantastic. But yeah, one Brazil nut a day is all you need to meet your selenium needs. But I feel like they're the appreciated nut in the mixed nut bag, right?
They are, because everyone always like, they're big, so they're kind of hard to eat. So I feel like people like put them, like they eat them last.
Yeah.
They're really great for gut health and thyroid health. So,
Yep. Win
and
win.
it's cheaper than a supplement. This is what I always tell people. I'm like, is your pee electric green after you start taking a new multivitamin? Probably because you're peeing out all your water soluble vitamins.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. Every morning now, I've got both my mom and my boyfriend will pull out their Brazil nut and they'll take it like a multivitamin and they'll look at me and be like, "Did you take your Brazil nut today?" I'm like, "I love that I've done this. I love that this is a thing."
Yeah, my friend, Maddie Miles, she had like a little container and we were all sitting at lunch and she's like, "Oh, let's eat our Brazil nuts for our thyroid health." And she gave like each of us a Brazil nut. It was really cute. So yeah, that's like another thing. I love like little, quick tips you can take away. Like
Mm.
food can contain all these nutrients. And a lot of times our bodies are like, and I think you said this and I love it. It's not what you eat, it's what you absorb. And
Mm.
our gut health determines that. So
Yeah, so we're talking about zinc, we're talking about magnesium, we're talking about protein. Omega-3 fats are also really important for gut health, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure. But you can eat those things all day, but how much are you actually absorbing? And so if you have inflammation going on in the gut, if you have poor motility, which means that you're either things are moving too quickly or too slowly through the gut, if you have an overgrowth of certain bacteria, it's not going to be as efficient of a process for you to extract those nutrients from the foods. So you can, again, you can eat all these nutrient rich foods, but you have to have a healthy gut environment in order to absorb them. And much of those, which are important minerals and nutrients for thyroid, hormones, mental health, and all of those things that we know are important.
and okay, yes, that is, and I love telling people that it's what you absorb, not what you eat. So, and like, I always go back to budget. I'm very like on my budget these days. Like, we want to get the most for like bang for our buck. So, if we can not take these expensive supplements and a lot of times that are developed in labs and they're not regulated by the FDA, blah blah blah.
Mhm.
That's a side note. But let's focus on food and what we're eating and kind of go from there. And then let's focus on absorption, which brings me into my favorite topic of poop. So, how often should we be pooping and what should we be looking for? I always recommend that everyone take a look in the toilet
Yeah.
because just like your period is a window into your health, so is your bowel movements and your poop.
Yeah, absolutely. And you should always be taking a look. It gives you such great feedback of how your digestion is working and also how you're doing in terms of your nutrition. Ideally, we should be having a daily bowel movement. We should be having a daily bowel movement. It should be formed. It should be light brown, not too dark, not too light, about brown in color. It should be about the length of your forearm. People freak out when I say that. They freak out. Like on TikTok, they were like, the length of my forearm. Ideally, yes, like the length of your forearm. I mean, that's about if you're intaking the right amount of food for your body and having healthy bowel movements, that's about the length it should be. It should not be accompanied by a lot of pain or gas. It shouldn't come on suddenly, and unless, of course, you've just had your morning cup of coffee. There shouldn't be undigested particles in it. It should not smudge and stick to the toilet bowl when you flush it down. And most people are not having those normal bowel movements, and that's a sign that something needs to change.
Yeah, and it's interesting like about your forearm like you said because most people are saying like they're struggling to go to the bathroom right here or they're having a lot of diarrhea and it's interesting you mentioned coffee. I always tell people, I'm like, evaluate your relationship with caffeine because sometimes it really can push things out too quickly. Like,
Mhm.
sadly, I had to stop drinking coffee because my gut just like couldn't handle it. I wanted to love it. I do love it and I wanted to have it, but I would have coffee and I'd have to be in the bathroom within 30 seconds of, probably 2 minutes. 30 seconds, it felt like that, but it was probably like 2 minutes.
Mm.
Like I was done and I'd have to go to the bathroom. So yeah, like length of your forearm formed, and it should not be super hard or super fast. It should be like a nice,
Mhm.
relaxing poop.
Yeah, I cut out coffee myself many years ago because I was struggling with my own gut issues, and I'm the same way. It's I like what you said there about evaluating your relationship with coffee, because if I ask a client to just experiment for 2 to 3 days not drinking coffee and they freak out and they're like, What do you mean?" That's okay. Well, what are we using coffee for? Are you using it to go to the bathroom? Are you using it for energy? Why are you low energy in the first place? I'm not anti-coffee. Like I have
Me either.
clients
I
who
just can't
still,
have it.
yeah, I have plenty of clients who still drink coffee, but there gets a point where if you're depending on it for energy and things like that, it can actually cause stress in the gut and the body. And then not using a laxative. This is another thing I see. We've kind of normalized the not we, but the I think the general medical field has normalized the use of laxatives to go to the bathroom. And it's not normal. There's certain conditions where laxatives are necessary or times when you're feeling really backed up. But having to rely on a laxative for most individuals who are healthy is not normal, and it can have long-term health consequences that I've seen show up in people that are pretty young because they've been chronically overdoing these.
Yeah, and that it's just yeah, I always say like it's a relationship, just like, sugar, alcohol, caffeine, like you need to look at your relationship with it because it can really impact your gut health because when I stopped drinking coffee, and I'm not anti-coffee either. I would if you can drink it and you don't have issues, like I am jealous of you, but good for you. But, my rosacea and my face cleared up and all these things like and then I took an intolerance test and I was actually intolerant to coffee. So it was like just as interesting. Like our bodies really know how to tell us what's going on. Are we actually listening to them is another story.
Mm, mhm. There's this quote that I used to use all the time. I haven't used it recently, but I need to bring it back. It was actually I started using it for myself. It was, if you listen to your body when it whispers, you won't have to hear it when it screams.
Yeah,
And
and I definitely I let it get to the point where it was screaming at me.
mhm.
Like, I remember I used to like map out bathrooms. Like I would get to a place, like a coffee shop, and I'd be like, okay, there's the bathroom. And like that's not okay. Like that's affecting your quality of life. But yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All that coffee tangent to say, listen to your gut. It's telling you what you need to hear.
Yeah.
And then my next question is, and this is something, I went through all this nutritional training and then I learned more about hormones. And then I learned about gut health and hormones, which is obviously hormones are my favorite topic. So, could you explain to us the beautiful relationship between our guts and our gut and our hormones?
Mm. Yeah, so there's female sex hormones, first of all, that's like one area, and then we have thyroid hormones, then we have insulin and cortisol, and the gut bacteria is responsible in every single one of those areas. So as I mentioned, if you're not absorbing zinc and magnesium or proteins and calcium, then you're not going to be able to make progesterone efficiently. You're not going to be able to detoxify estrogen the way that you should be. There's an enzyme beta glucuronidase, which is responsible for for estrogen recycling through the body. So if you have an imbalance of this enzyme, then you could have high estrogen levels, which can lead to PMS and fibroids and all types of hormone imbalance. And then you get into thyroid function. And if your gut bacteria is not optimal, then you're not going to convert thyroid hormone into its active form, which is going to cause sluggish bowels, which is then going to lead to further estrogen dominance. Then blood sugar balance. Research has shown that our gut bacteria are going to play an important role for balancing our blood sugar. And we know that if your blood sugar is not balanced, your hormones are going to be thrown off because we need to have balanced blood sugar throughout the day in order to have those hormone productions that we should be having. So every everything is really coming full circle here when I start to talk about it, and I know it's a lot, but that's because the gut is playing an integral role in every type of hormone that we have in the body.
Yeah, and that's like the thing is like it does sound like a lot because it is a lot. It's a lot of things that are interconnected and that's when I always say like when I'm working with someone new on hormone health, I'm like this is going to be a whole process. Like it's not like we're going to change one thing and I tell people seed cycling is not a magic bullet.
Mm,
It helps with a lot. It is good for gut health, but hormone health is an entire process and we are going to look at just like gut health, we are going to look at everything.
yeah.
And it might feel overwhelming, but we're going to do it together. So it'll be okay.
Yeah, I always encourage people to stay patient because if it were a quick fix overnight, chances are it's not going to last because that's like a laxative. You can think of a quick fix like a laxative. That's what a laxative is. It's a quick fix. It's a let's get you feeling comfortable within 24 hours and just, have an elimination. But for true sustainable change, I mean, we have to remember our hormones throughout the course of a month are constantly changing. So
Yes.
especially as females, like when we're taking data points of like how am I doing, how are my bowel movements doing, give yourself a few months because you're going through periods where your hormones are completely different in different weeks and your bowel movements are going to be different and your body needs time to adjust. So I always really try to focus on celebrating the small wins, taking it one day at a time, knowing that not every reaction that you have is a bad reaction. Sometimes your body is taking some time to even itself out. All important things to remember if you're on this journey to better gut health and hormone balance.
Yeah, that is well said. And it's true. It's a journey, it's a process. It sounds cliche, but that's what it is. And it's ever changing. I would say I really started taking my gut health seriously, I would say 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago. And I would say I'm just now in the past 6 months at a place where I feel like it's really improved. I mean, it takes time to heal things too. Like if you think about the abuse we put our guts through and our bodies through, like it takes time to heal that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's really true. And, everybody struggles at some point. And I think it's important to like be sensitive to that because being uncomfortable or having digestive issues is really, really uncomfortable. I mean, I spent most of my childhood on the toilet and to this day, like I hate wearing tight clothes. Like I hate wearing any sort of tight pants because I just have this chronic, like, resistance to anything touching my stomach because of how much pain I was always in. So it can be
Yeah.
really debilitating for people. And so I try to be very sympathetic towards that.
Yeah. And like I tell people all the time, like I went through years of my life where I was constantly worried I was going to like poop my pants. Like I just had all kinds of issues, like, which is a whole nother side note. But yeah, gut health is and hormone health are both like very sensitive and people don't like to talk about them. So I like that, that's why I love your social media. Why I was really drawn to it was you're normalizing topics that aren't traditionally talked about. And I'm saying traditional in air quotes, if you can see me, if you can't, because I think it's important that we do talk about things. Like we're supposed to poop every day. Like, why don't we talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how we can talk about like all these other topics that should, things that really quite frankly don't matter. Like we're fine publicizing detox teas and all these fad diets, yet nobody can talk about something that we do naturally every single day. And it's like some days I have a bowel movement and want to like go on TikTok and be like, for all the people that wondered why it's abnormal to have a, length of your forearm poop, here's mine every day. And like realizing how off-putting that would be to society,
Like
obviously.
it is when we go on vacation with people, my friends who know me like well and have traveled with me laugh because I'll be like, have you pooped today? Like,
Yeah.
how are your travel poops? Because like that's a thing too. And I like to try to like break the ice and take the anxiety off of it
Mhm.
because our bodies, like, if we're nervous about it subconsciously, like I was reading that most Americans are constipated because they're scared or nervous about going to the bathroom in public.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That I heard
I can poop anywhere now because
I
I'm not getting constipated again. It is the worst thing in the world. I will poop anywhere.
same. I have no issue. Like I will be in the grocery store, I'll be at a gas station. I do
Coffee shop,
not
here for
care.
it.
Yeah, it's not good to hold it in too. It's not good for your just general colon to hold stool and not have a bowel movement. So if you can get past that fear, I know it's not easy for everybody, but and the average American or not American, the average human passes gas like at least once an hour. So, normalize passing gas. It's okay. Obviously don't do it in someone's face, but
But if you have to, you have to. And like
yeah.
I always like the way I got over it, because I used to be terrified of it, like terrified of it, especially because I was having all these other issues, which was just like whatever. I just had to remember that like the person who's coming in here after me, they also poop. Like we all poop. And it's not on me if they're judging my poop. Like they are not worth my constipation. I'm sorry, but like your judgment is not worth me being unwell.
No, absolutely not. No, your health comes first and we're all human. We all should be pooping and they can deal with it. You're in a public place. So
Okay, I have one last question.
yeah.
And it's probably like the one that I should have asked in the beginning. I know a lot of people who listen to this will be asking, okay, well, what about probiotics? And I
Mm,
know this actually could probably be a whole nother podcast.
mhm,
Um, one, probiotic foods, but two, like if people do want to choose a probiotic, do you
mhm.
have one you like, or do you have a guiding scale of how to help people choose one? Because I know that's like a hot thing, like people want to try.
Yeah, this is a great question. And I'll go back to the food first mentality just to start. So, if you can get probiotics from food and you notice that that really helps with your digestion, so things like kimchi, sauerkraut, kombucha, kefir, yogurt, miso, then if you can incorporate a variety of those into your diet, then that's great. And if that makes you feel better, that's even better because that's nature's intended probiotics. If somebody has a history of antibiotic use or chronic stress to their body, if they have maybe, inflammatory bowel disease or IBS, there's situations where a probiotic supplement might benefit. And, there's so much new research coming out, let's try to pinpoint specific strains to specific things like urinary tract health or mood or, whatnot. But generally there's three classes of probiotics. So we have the lactobacillus bifido blends. Those are kind of the more general, and then we have the Saccharomyces boulardii, and the soil-based probiotics. So depending on the person's condition will depend on which type that I recommend. But for brands that I usually like to use, I really like the doctor's formulated brands. I really like Claire Labs. They have a good quality product. um, I'm trying to think of some other ones, like PB8 is actually a good cheaper brand for someone looking just for kind of a basic probiotic. Culturelle, I've had good luck with Culturelle with some clients. Flora Store.
I
uh,
used Cultural when I was in the hospital. That's what we used. Not when I worked in the hospital, we used
yeah.
Cultural.
And to know, some people say, well, how do I know if it's working? Well, if your bowel movements are improving, and not just bowel movements, but maybe mood, maybe skin issues, maybe you feel like you tolerate dairy a little bit better. Maybe you find that you go out night of drinking and you don't feel as crappy the next day. Sometimes that means maybe some less inflammation in the gut. So there's little symptoms. It's not a cure all, but there's little symptoms to work out and see, okay, maybe I can benefit from a little bit of a supplement here. And like I said, a lot of that can be due to their birth, where they started off in terms of their gut microbiome, because we know those early years of life are kind of where you establish your gut bacteria. So if they had, C-section birth, if they were bottle fed, those are some indicators that they might even, be of greater benefit to having a probiotic supplement.
Cool. That's an interesting fact. I actually did not know either of those. That's
Mhm.
interesting. Cool. Okay. I lied. I actually have one more question and then that's it. So I ask most people this, everyone this who comes on the podcast, and I'm going to alter it slightly for the specific topic. If we end the stigma around our poop and our periods, how does that change the world going forward?
Wow. I mean,
It's a
look at
huge question that I always drop at the end.
no, I love it. I mean, look at the research. Look at the research. Gut microbiome linked to COVID, gut microbiome linked to neurological disease, gut microbiome linked to mental health. I mean, if we stop the stigma, that means that what I see is that our gut health becomes a priority and it becomes more important, and that people start to advocate for themselves when they're having gut issues and they start to see it as a concern. I see we start, preventing some of these long-term health consequences that are awful, right? To just put it very simply, like that would be an ideal world, is when we start normalizing this stuff and prioritizing our gut health and stop normalizing, being shy about it, and normalizing having digestive issues without addressing them or just giving a quick fix for them. And shut down some of the pharmaceutical industries that are, making billions of dollars off of these drugs because we're just sick. So,
I 100% agree. Like, if we could just end the stigma, it increases education and advocacy, like self advocacy, which I mean, that's the answer. I mean, it's not a quick answer, but that's definitely, I think it starts in conversation. I think most things do.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I love doctors. I think they're great, but this is a missing link between, you go to your endocrinologist, you go to your gynecologist, you go to all these people, and everybody should be talking about your gut health. Everyone should ask how your bowel movements are. Everybody should ask what your diet's like. I mean, if we're not, we're doing a disservice to that individual, or they should be referred to a dietitian. Realistically, that's what should happen.
Yes, refer them to us.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming on. I want to give you one last chance to plug your pages, tell people where to find you. I think that's one of the most exciting things. I love finding new resources through podcasts. So tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, so nutritionrewired.com is where you can find most of my resources, my gut healing guide. I also have certified CBD oil. And then my Instagram, which is Nutrition Rewired. And I have lots of fun videos and informational tips on there for people to take away.
Yay. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And I know you'll probably be back on. We'll probably have to dive into a whole nother subset of things, but thank you. And until next time, thanks you guys for listening.
Thanks, Kate. This was fun.